Have we talked about this scene before in this class? Because I'm one day behind with this class than the other class. Okay, let's do it, even though it is a bit awkward. Okay, so everyone on this last page. He says, so in the movie version, he screams out, Stella, you know, in this like really annoying voice. It's not the standing outside the French Quarter yelling her name like Romeo. It's like, I need my snacks, you know, like it's very, it's rude. Yeah, exactly. But in the play it says, Stanley, so Stanley and Stella are actually standing together. Eunice hands Stella the baby and she accepts the child sobbingly. Eunice continues downstairs and enters the kitchen where the men, except for Stanley, are returning silently to their places about the table. Stanley has gone out on the porch and stands at the foot of the steps looking at Stella. So we again get that kind of repetition of the scene where he's down at the bottom and she's up above. And when we think of power structures, right, we usually think of if you're up above, I've got the high ground, Anakin. Like you are you are in a bigger position of power there, right? So even though Stanley is the one who has orchestrated the scene and sent her sister away, and it was very disturbing to everyone involved, now Stella is standing at the top of the stairs and he is at the bottom of the stairs looking at Stella. And Stanley says a bit uncertainly, Stella. So it's not that yelling out annoyingly, it's a bit uncertainly, I can't say that. And they are pretty close together. And it says she sobs with inhuman abandon. There is something luxurious in her complete surrender to crying now that her sister is gone. So tell me what Stella's mind state is like according to this little description. Yeah.
So Kylie and I were talking about how in the book, Stella seems to blame herself way more than she blames Stanley. So this could just show that she's like deep in the self-hatred that she maybe has messed up.
Yeah, because there aren't as much like, there isn't as much what have you done to my sister? Oh God, what have you done to my sister? Like she does say that in the play, but there isn't as much like disdain that she has towards Stanley in the scene. Whereas here she's like maybe internalizing some of this stuff. Okay. What else is she feeling right now? She sobs with inhuman abandon. There's something luxurious in her complete surrender to crying out her sister's gone. Tell me about, oh yeah, Emma.
The thing that says about luxurious, like maybe she is a little bit relieved because she's finally finding time to like revel in her own emotions instead of I don't know, kind of protecting her sister from her own emotions, so she's able to kind of let go all that thing.
Yeah, I really like that word. I'm writing it down, that revel in her own emotions, and that she gets to like let go of some sort of veneer that she was holding on to for the sake of Blanche. Okay.
Kind of like that, I was going to say, she probably feels like kind of comforted, even after her sister is just being taken. It's like that feeling when you've like bottled so much stuff in, like for so long, and then just being able to let it all out, it's like relieving. It's like
yeah.
Even though you're breaking down, it's kind of just like, whew.
Right. And so there's this idea that now she's in a space where she can do that, and her sister was interrupting that kind of like reveling or that kind of release that you can have when you just start sobbing uncontrollably. Yeah, there's something like, and I like the word you used too there, I wrote it down, comforting about being able to let your emotions out in that way. Yeah, Grace.
It kind of reminds me of the meme that's like NMC something, cold something. Like,
I don't know this meme.
It's a little bit, but it's just like she finally doesn't have to think about Stella and not Stella. She just think about Blanche, think about Stanley, but it's just been doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like she's not really caring, you know, like herself.
Yeah. Okay, yes, good. So removing Blanche from the picture then, removing her from the setting, she gets to again return back to her own emotions. And you think about how that might work in her relationship with Stanley too. Before Blanche got there, that's kind of the image we have of Stella, being thrilled by him being a little violent and wrecking the apartment, or saying like, oh yeah, he came back, he was good as a lamb, as she's like laying in her bed at the start of that scene, right? Like she does revel in her emotions and her emotional state. And so here saying it's something luxurious and the complete surrender to crying now that her sister is gone, she can kind of abandon any sort of like rationality about a relationship now. She doesn't have Blanche here like kind of pecking at her and saying like, he's no good for you, he's violent, he's gonna hurt the baby, et cetera, et cetera. She can forget about all of that and just feel emotions. And how does Stanley respond? He says voluptuously and soothingly. I don't know. Voluptuously, yeah, he's speaking voluptuously. Interesting. He says, now honey, now love, now love. He kneels beside her and his fingers find the opening of her blouse. Now love, now love. The luxurious sobbing, the sensual murmur fade away under the swelling music of the blue piano and the muted trumpet. So what does that suggest here about Stanley's character then? And maybe about the relationship, because that's where this group is taking us, the themes about the relationships between Stanley and Stella. What is their relationship maybe built on? You don't want to say because it's uncomfortable. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that
built on lust here, right?
Mhm.
Completely. And it's built on him seeing her in this emotionally vulnerable position and kind of taking advantage of it. And I think we can see that, like, she is like sobbing about her sister being taken away to a mental hospital, and he's like putting on the moves. What?
Yeah.
And yet it says the luxurious sobbing continues. So there's this something about Stella responding to that she likes. And she's just like, okay, like this is where the relationship is going again. And this is where I'm sort of comfortable being. Yeah.
For her crying, you like Stanley wasn't if she's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So him like being completely aware of being a sleazebag. I think so. Yeah. And he's done that before, right? He's done that when he hits her, and then this is what like sparks them having a great night, you know, like, and he's sort of like, I don't know that he's completely self-aware of it, or if he's just playing a part that he is kind of comfortable in. But both of them seem to be far more comfortable at the end of this scene than I think we, the readers, are comfortable with. You know, like we read this and we're just like, oh, like it's almost like physically appalling, where I'm just like get like a little nauseous about this relationship, where it's just gross, you know. And yet they seem like this is going to be like, they seem like they're going to live their version of happily ever after, which is just the cycle of abuse that Stella sort of enjoys and then gets back into, you know. Okay, so then that brings up this idea then that they are about fantasy. I think we're going to do a little, is there a blank spot on about this? Yeah, why don't you flip your Venn diagrams over? And I want you to take some notes here. Okay, I need my notes though. So to me, this ending suggests that Stella and Stanley are living on like a totally different plane of reality than I am. If I were, I mean, I'm hopefully, like, it's, you know, obviously this is about human behavior and kind of what's nasty about human behavior, and so we can't just see ourselves as above it all. But I kind of would hope, as I read this, that I wouldn't behave this way. And part of what like I recognize about them is a way that human beings think, but a way that I would like to avoid thinking. And so I get into this idea of how we know what we know. Like, how does Stella know that this is the relationship that she wants to be in and that this is her version of reality? How does Stanley know that this is the way he wants to exercise power and this is his version of reality? And so we get into this idea that as we go through life and as we make these choices about who we're going to be in relationships with and who we are going to marry and all of that, we have to be able to distinguish fact from fiction. And I think living in 2021, we've realized how hard that can be, not just for ourselves, but like we definitely look at other people and think, wow, they don't know what is fact and what is fiction. You know, as we watched people storm the Capitol and they were like talking about how like all the QAnon conspiracies about how, well, we don't need to get into QAnon, but it became really obvious that none of us can really distinguish anymore what is true and what is false. And that is a really scary place to live in. Basically, we need to establish an epistemological sense of epistemological well-being, and sometimes we are denied that. So this is kind of what gaslighting would be based on. Epistemological well-being says, I, as a person, can distinguish fact from fiction. You have a kind of faith in yourself and your own powers of knowing that say, yes, I can tell what is the truth and what is not. But what happens with a situation like gaslighting is that somebody else is presenting you with what seems to be fact, but you can't tell anymore. And so it creates this real uncertainty in yourself, you know, and these days we all seem to kind of be living in this state of epistemological, what's the opposite of well-being, uncertainty, where, you know, I'll have arguments with my dad. He's the one I always argue with at the dinner table. And he'll say stuff like, okay, so our most recent one, he said, federal tax dollars fund abortions. And I said, no, federal tax dollars do not fund abortions. Federal tax dollars fund some Planned Parenthood that can't be used towards abortion. So we're having this argument back and forth. And it's like, both of us have these different versions of facts. So I pull up on my phone, I pull up a New York Times article that says because of this thing called the something code, now I can't remember, DAYS, I think, the DAYS code, federal funding cannot go towards abortions. But my dad pulls up his own article, and I don't remember what it was on. I want to say it was Fox News, but I can't remember, that said federal funding absolutely does go to abortions, and here's how. So we both have two sources that say the exact same thing from sources that are supposed to be national news, and we cannot decide who is right. And that's where you get this idea of epistemological uncertainty, where you're just like, well, if there are two different facts, then how do we choose the truth? And philosophers have been trying to figure that out since philosophy started. That's kind of like where we put like, kind of like the beginnings of philosophy, is figuring out how do we know what we know? And the study of knowledge is called epistemology. It's very meta. It's like, how do we gain knowledge about gaining knowledge? How do we know what we know? And they said there's three different types of knowing. Number one, there is belief. Belief is something that is just, it's based on faith and trust, you know? I believe that when I close my eyes, you guys are still in the room. I believe that, I'm trying to think of a better one, like, I believe that my parents love me. That's a kind of like, I have faith that my parents love me. I don't have any like necessarily hard scientific proof, but I've got this kind of faith. So that's that. Truth is facts. It is when your belief turns into what you can say is known. And justification is the process of turning belief into truth. And philosophers say that because there's not necessarily hard facts that we can see without like it being filtered through our perception, epistemology is based on justification. So how we know what we know is a process of justification where we take things and say, I believe there is a person called Trent that is sitting in front of me, and I kind of filter that through my way of knowing, and I say, I'm going to be, because I can see him, because I can hear him when he speaks, I'm justifying that that is actually a truth. So everything that we think we know needs a process of justification. And there are a few ways, big ways that we justify things. And this is according to a whole bunch of different philosophers at different points in history, and there are more than this, but I've chosen the ones that I think are going to apply the most to this play. So the first one is called empiricism. This is the one you hear about in science class. Empiricism is when your knowledge is gained. So you're justifying what you know to be fact knowledge is gained, through observations of the senses. So it's all about how you experience the world. You gain your knowledge through your experiences. So the empiricists say we can trust what we see and what we feel and what we hear, that actually exists. Hopefully, if we're of sound mind. So I can trust because I can see Trent. Trent is right there. I can trust that because I can feel this podium. It is right there. So this is what the scientific method is based on. If it has observable results, then you can believe that those results are true. So back to my thing about my parents loving me. If they they hug me and they buy me things and they feed me, okay, then I'm going to assume through this process of justification then that means that they love me. So that's empiricism. The second one I want to talk about is called idealism. Now, this is where knowledge is based on intuition. Everything is filtered through your perception. So all knowledge is mentally constructed. These guys, when they get very extreme, and there are some that are extreme, would say, when I close my eyes, I have no guarantee that you guys are still in the room. I have no guarantee that you guys exist at all. I have no guarantee that I am not a dog's dream, just acting out my life. But they said the only knowledge then that you can know is what you kind of believe is true, right? So the world is like all of our knowledge of the world is based on our own mental constructions. That's idealism. All right, the next one I want to talk about is called Destructivism. And this is a lot like idealism. It's not saying that our senses, you can't trust necessarily your senses because it's all being filtered through my point of view. But constructivism is saying it's social. So knowledge is based on social constructions. So they say, because we're all human beings with motives, nothing that we understand about the world is objective. Nothing is without its motivations. And as a kind of human culture, we decide what truth is and what not truth is. So that would kind of be like, I know this desk is here, not because I can touch it, but because I know Alan, you can see this desk, right? And Emma, you can see this desk, and Kylie can see the desk, and okay, then I can say that that's true. Because constructively, socially, we all agree that this desk is real. So socially, we've all constructed this desk as being real. So it has to do with all of us agreeing on certain truths. And then the last one is called Pragmatism. And this says that we develop knowledge based on what is useful and valuable, based on usefulness and value to us. So there's probably a real world out there for pragmatism. There's probably a world, but it doesn't really matter. The way that we understand that world is through what is useful. So let's say I can't fully trust my senses. It's called built through my mind, right? And so when I touch this desk, I can't trust that it's actually real because I might be, schizophrenic and feeling things that I can't actually feel. However, I can sit in it. So when I do this is proving that this desk is real to me. So anything that I can use, we're going to develop knowledge about those things that I can use. Whatever helps us survive is how we have developed knowledge. So to go back to my parents' example, I can trust, so I have faith that they believe in me, right? Or that they love me. But I want to justify that is a fact. Well, my parents, it would kind of be like my parents protect me, and if I love them, it is in my best interest to love my parents because by showing my parents love, then they will reciprocate that and continue to protect me. So then I can trust that we do in fact love each other. That would be pragmatism. You think about, and none of it is conscious. You're thinking about the world in ways that you can use it. Okay, that was a lot of information. What I want to do now is think about which characters commit to which kind of epistemology up here. Because I think that's part of the reason that they cannot communicate, is that they understand the reality of the world differently. One of them might be more of an idealist, one of them might be a constructivist, one of them might be an empiricist, like they're all thinking about the world in totally different ways. So let's see. Two curves. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So Brock and Grace, you guys are going to be thinking about, well, which character do you want? Blanche, Stella, Mitch, or Stanley? Okay, you guys are going to be thinking about Mitch. Adeline and Emma, you guys are going to be thinking about Stella, Stanley, or Blanche? Blanche. You guys? Stanley, and you guys are going to be Stella. Okay, so on that same piece of paper where you've been taking notes, I know you've got room, or at least one of you has room on there. I want you to decide which epistemology your character seems to commit to the most, and then I want you to find at least 2 pieces of direct evidence that support that reading. And just write down like the beginning of the quote and the page number. So it's just so that we can all go to that section. Okay, you got it? Okay, go for it. Okay. All right, Mitch, where should we go?
125, 126.
Okay, and everybody should turn there because we're all going to help close read this little section. Okay, great. And what epistemology did you guys think that?
Destructivism, because he's always worried about like things, and he always kind of builds himself off of like whatever.
Okay, so did you find like a specific sentence that we can look at together, since this is kind of a longer section?
So Stanley at the bottom of 125, not 125, the top of 126, he like we got that right. I told him I'd have that on the front for the rest of my life. And so Mitch through with her. And Stan was like, I don't think he's through with her. I just think he's wised up. And with
Interesting.
like past situations with Mitch, we had like 5 pieces of evidence for Mitch. He's always worried about like what other people think and like how other people perceive them. Like, he talked with his mother about Wedge and like wants me to get married, so I've got to get married.
Yeah.
He didn't want to take off his jacket because he sweats and sweating's not cool. That's what society said.
Yeah.
And so,
And like going to the gym and keeping himself fit is like social standard. He was trying to live.
Yeah, good. So there's all these different like ways that he thinks that he's supposed to be a man. And one of those things is what Stanley's talking about on 125, 126, where he's like, I'd have that on my conscience the rest of my life if I knew all that stuff and let my best friend get caught. And then Stanley says, no, I don't think he's necessarily through with her, just wised up. And Stanley says, well, he's not going to marry her. Maybe he was, but he's not going to jump in a tank with a school of sharks now. Okay, so Stanley assumes something on that page. He assumes that when I tell Mitch that Blanche has been with many strangers, has had intimacies with many strangers, there is no way that he is going to want to marry Blanche. All right, and it seems like kind of a given. We're like, oh, well, it's the 1940s, that makes sense. But why is that the case? Like, why would Mitch be troubled by the fact that Blanche has had sex with lots of people? It's kind of what the idea is.
And so when like you find all this stuff out about Blanche and Stanley talking horribly about like this idea of oh yeah, she's actually really
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, oh, but other people see this.
So it's like a socially agreed upon idea that someone who is wife material is someone who is innocent that way.
Well, if your best friend tells you that there's a very common problem, because you don't see, you're either love struck or like you know, just like full of love, and if your best friend sees it from outside, he's telling Mitch like the problem.
Okay, cool. So this is like, to go back to last time, this is like kind of the bros before. I hate saying this every time, but it's kind of the bros before hoes type of idea again, where it's like, okay, these women are all trying to trick us, and here he says trapped, like, or caught, and a school of sharks. So it's like all these women are out to get us, and we have to band together to try to sort of overcome the influence of these tricky women, right? And all of that is built on these constructed ideas of what gender is about then. Yeah.
I also think one of the big reasons Mitch is so terrified now is because it was Stanley telling him that, basically saying Blanche was bad, because in his little community of, well, the bowling team, really, he seems pretty isolated. Stanley has basically become the arbiter of truth in that situation.
Okay, so it might be constructivism, and with one person being
yes,
kind of like
the authority
person
figure being the
constructing
constructor of truth.
Which
yes.
doesn't that happen? I mean, that kind of with Lord of the Flies, which comes up next, we're going to be talking about like how someone will gain power in that way. And doesn't that kind of happen in our society, where one person has far more control over what is truth and what is not truth than other people? You know, we don't live in this democratically elected truth system. There we go. Grace.
Basically, exactly like what was about Stanley being like arbiter of truth. Like, because it's Stanley, and Stanley seems to be an example of masculinity and how to be a man in this book. Mitch looks at him and he sees, oh, if Stanley says that Blanche isn't going to be a good wife, I have to listen to the book. Stanley, he's got a wife, he's got a kid on the way. He's the example of manhood. And
Yeah.
I need to do this, and I need to do this for my mother. I have to call Stanley. Stanley obviously knows how to do this.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get back to here then. So if Stanley is the one who is like sort of determining truth, I want to like walk through this a little bit carefully because I'm trying to explain it in my own head too. We need to go back to this idea. So we again kind of just said, well, that's the way it was in the 40s. Women needed to be sexually innocent, sexually pure in order to be marriage material, right? Why? Where does that come from? Like, is that an evolutionary idea? Is that that's a social idea? Like, if we're going back to what like truth this is, like, why did we construct that idea as a society? Yeah.
Because other positions of authority, like in the Middle Ages, that'd be like the church, who was the authority, constructed the truth, saying that that was necessary.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So is that just arbitrary then? They just decided like randomly, like, and women need to be virgins. Okay, let's move on from that. Or does that come from something? Because I think there's something about power there too. If Stanley is the one who gets to determine what is truth and what is not, and what Grace said is that Stanley is determining what is truth and what is not based on sort of like how other people see his experiences of the world, then you don't want to let the school of sharks and the people who are trying to catch you be the arbiters of truth. You don't want the women to decide what is truth and what is not, right? And if we base like how we understand truth on experiences, then you want to keep women having as few of experiences as possible so that they can't be the ones who determine truth. And I think actually throughout history, we've seen the way that that kind of social construction of knowledge about women has gotten women into a lot of trouble, you know, like keeping them sort of like in the dark, keeping them like not experienced. Then you're more likely to be able to say to that one, well, this is the truth. I mean, it goes back to that gaslighting idea. This is the truth. This is the truth you should expect. You should accept. You should know because, like, you should believe me because I have all this experience of the world and you've been kept, you know, in your father's household and now in my household. So you don't have that experience to base truth on, you know? And this goes to this idea of Blanche not wanting to look old too. Let's actually go to that section. Sorry, I know I'm getting a little sidetracked here from what we did. Go to where Mitch says, I don't mind you being old, but I thought you were straight. This is page 145. And then we're gonna, who did Blanche again for theirs? Okay, cool, we'll go to you guys now. Did you guys do this section by any chance? Okay. So Mitch turns on the light and he says, I don't mind you being older than what I thought, but all the rest of it, Christ, that pitch about your ideals being so old-fashioned and all the malarkey, malarkey. This is where it comes from. That you've just, Joe Biden is old. Malarkey is when they're in the 40s. All the malarkey that you've dished out all summer. Oh, I knew you weren't 16 anymore, but I was fool enough to believe you straight. So sometimes when we talk about women getting older, we're talking about beauty and aesthetics. We're like, oh, well, they don't look as good when they're older. They're all saggy and wrinkly and all of that. And so they don't have kind of the beauty of youth. And that's why men wouldn't want to be attached to them, right? But here Mitch is not necessarily talking about her beauty. He's like, I knew you were old than what I thought, but I thought you were straight. So what is the problem here with Blanche being old, according to Mitch? It's not that she's got wrinkles. Yeah.
It's that she has like experienced things. She's experienced life and been through a lot of stuff. And so it's like how we were talking about earlier, if you let women experience things and gain knowledge through that, then they can start to make their own truth. And that's truth that matters.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful way of saying it. That's exactly what I was getting at here. It's about the experiences and the experiences piling up so that she can create her own kind of truth. And let's go to Blanche then. What kind of truth is she committed to up here, do you think?
We think it's like a mix of idealism and
Yeah, constructivism. Yeah.
And we like looked at page 114 when she's talking about her dead husband and kind of how she was kind of like, she saw him in a way that like wasn't the way he actually was.
Yeah.
We were kind of looking, I was looking specifically at the line that she says, but I was unlucky, deluded. So that kind of shows that she built this image of her husband in her head. And then as time has gone on and after his death, she used kind of constructivism to take other people's opinions and views of her husband to kind of create this new one that didn't really match exactly with the initial picture.
Look, yeah, so he was a boy, just a boy when I was a very young girl. When I was 16, I made the discovery, love, all at once and much, much too completely. I was like you suddenly turned a blinding light on, something that had always been half in shadow. That's how it struck the world for me, but I was unlucky, deluded. Okay, so I see what you're saying with the unlucky and the deluded part of it, like that she thought that she was in love and she could have stayed in love if she was fully an idealist. But because she has to understand the way that other people see the world, she starts to see herself as unlucky because the person she's chosen to be in love with is gay, right? So look a little bit earlier though. We've been talking about how she turned on the light and this reveals that she's not straight, like that she has, and not in the way that we're thinking, like not in the gay husband way, but in just she wasn't a proper lady, right? She turns the light on and Mitch is like, ugh, you're old and you're unclean and I can't take you home to mother, which is its own kind of weird perversity that maybe we should talk about, that he's like so into his mom. But anyway, here it says she turns on the light and it was a blinding light on something that had always been half in shadow, and that's how it struck the world for me. She's talking about love. So how is she using light here that is maybe different than the other ways that she uses light? Usually she uses light to turn it off and dim what she looks like to the rest of the world, right? Probably for aesthetics and for this idea that like I don't want to show who I really am. What does it mean here that she turns on the blinding light, Emma?
I feel like with this blinding light of love, and like how it didn't work out well for her is maybe the reason that she kind of uses darkness and like dim light to hide herself now, because in the beginning, like with her husband, she has this blinding bright light and she could see everything that she wanted to see, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, in the sense of just being in love with him and not seeing him for who he actually was.
Yeah.
So I think once like the truth about him is revealed to her, then she moves past darkness and dimness because
fascinating then that it's both the light and the darkness that obscures. The light blinds you to things and the darkness dims things for you.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention that too, that light can blind you just as much as darkness. And then also later kind of confirming that Blanche wasn't really, I don't know, thinking straight when she was in love. Stella says on page 124, I think Blanche didn't just love him, but worship the ground he walked on, adored him, and thought him almost too fine to be human. Yeah.
So I love that quote. Was that the quote that you guys were going to use for yours?
No,
Okay.
I just stumbled upon it when I was looking for one and
Wonderful.
thought it would be good for this part.
Yeah. So it's she's kind of constructed then this whole fantasy about what this husband was supposed to be like, and that leaves her then vulnerable to reality when she sees, and maybe reality in an empirical sense, like we don't know actually what should be reality and what shouldn't in this play, but when she sees with her eyes that he is with another man, this destroys her concept of love completely. You know, it forces her to see things the way that it actually is. Grace?
I think the fact that she didn't think
Yeah.
also plays into the fact that body, all these facts, like,
Yeah.
and it's not like mentioned ever. Oh, we did, but it's just like knowing that fact, and then knowing that she's back in Mississippi, right where she has like this big performance. She has to understand and teach performances to kids. Like that played a role in how she acts.
Yeah, and actually she does mention it a few times obliquely. So look on page 57, because I think this proves Grace's point really well. Like she'll mention Poe. She understands this apartment through her understanding of Poe, or she'll talk about how she teaches young kids about Romeo. And so she does kind of like reference it sometimes. So Mitch has this inscription on his cigarette case, right? And he says, yes, read the inscription. Did I already say page 57?
Yeah.
Okay. And it says, Blanche says, oh, is there an inscription? I can't make it out. And he strikes a match and moves closer. So it's this light, but it's kind of this dim, sort of romantic light. And she says, oh, reading with feigned difficulty. And if God chose, I shall but love thee better after death. Why, that's from my favorite sonnet by Mrs. Browning. And I'm going to read you the sonnet. So the sonnet is, how do I love thee? This is a familiar one to you. It says, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. When feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely as men strive for right. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seem to lose and my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, and if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. So it's a poem that is about a kind of blinding, delusional love. It's a poem that is about like loving you no matter like what the circumstances, no matter what I see, no matter what experiences I have, I am going to love you even after death. So I think Grace is right that she understands the world through these kind of romances and fantasies. And all of the literature that she presents is all romantic literature that has clear heroes and clear villains and clear like heroines that swooped in to be like the hero swoops in to save the heroines. Like a lot of the stuff that she references is like that. So go to page 145 as well. And this is kind of the result of Blanche's epistemology then. Her kind of like balance between constructivism and idealism. And I think this is where we get the tragedy of Blanche that she has to balance. It says, I don't want realism. I want magic. And Mitch laughs at her when she says that. And she says, yes, magic. I try to give that to people. I misrepresent things to them. I don't tell truth. I tell what ought to be truth. And if that is sinful, then let me be damned for it. Don't turn the light on. So there is Blanche saying, really self-aware, like she's being very self-aware there. She is like, I know that this is not reality. I know that you guys have decided there's a different reality and that I have to kind of like recognize my place in that reality. But in my reality, it is beautiful. It is magical. And I wanted to create that for you, Mitch. And I think that Mitch, with that inscription on the cigarette case, like he would like that too, I think in some ways. But he's unwilling to accept her version of that magic, you know. He's like, no, because now I know that you have, you know, done this with other men, so then it's not so special for me. And I misrepresent things to them. She's like, I know I'm telling lies, but that's what I'm committed to. I think you guys are exactly right, that she's not in one full camp or another. And that is like what causes the breakdown a little bit. Okay, let's go to Stanley then. What's Stanley's epistemological commitment?
We said he's both pragmatic, like pragmatism and empiricism.
Yeah.
Like especially with the scene on page 41 where he's like worrying about Blanche's finances and all her papers, because like him knowing what's in those papers is very useful to him.
Yeah.
But it's also like he needs to worry about those because he's the man and that's his previous experience with dealing with the bills and papers and whatnot.
Yeah. So is that his pragmatic side, or is that his empiricist side, or is that both?
We said that it was both because, well, just because of the usefulness of it to him and from his previous experiences and papers.
Yeah. So think about that Stanley can have a pragmatic side that says, I can understand the world through what is useful to me. And that an empiricist view of the world, that I can see things and feel things and touch them and know that they are good and that they are useful for me. What does that say about gender in this book? But yeah,
Words are hard, but
I
I just,
understand.
yeah, the pragmatist view also really makes sense because he seems like a total idiot, but he also seems to have a very firm grasp on things like Napoleonic code only so long as it benefits him.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he could spell it, but he understands the ins and outs of the concept.
Yes, exactly. So then he's sitting there saying like spouting legalism, right? Legalese.
Yeah.
And everyone just has to say like, no, you're right here. Even
Sure
though
thing, boss.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kylie.
We also talk about how like that affects his relationships, how he uses other people because they're useful to him. And the scene that we like really focused on was like 72 on page 72, where Stella and James are talking about him after he like went crazy.
Yeah.
And the sentence that I was really looking at was when Stella says he was good as a lamb when I came back, and he's really very, very ashamed of himself, which kind of just shows like he learned through his experience that that's where the empiricism comes into the scene, I guess.
Yeah.
But he uses what he's learned from experience to
Get what he wants.
Yeah.
To get what he wants.
To manipulate people and get what he wants. Yeah. Which like in this scene too, he smashes all the light bulbs. So we're thinking about light and how all of this like symbolism about knowledge becomes relevant as each of the characters interact with light and light bulbs, and he smashes them all, not because he thinks that the light is going to represent him in a different way, but because Stella will be thrilled by it. So he can kind of like afford to play with truth and like knowledge in this way that will like then manipulate people into getting what he wants. Grace?
I think, but also the fact that he smashed all of the light bulbs in the house is not very useful to him. He then has to go pay to get a whole bunch of new light bulbs. And like,
so maybe it's a hierarchy of use.
Yeah, it's like he like learns things through empiricism. He sees them, he feels them, he touches them, and then as he like processes them, he thinks, okay, how do I use the fact that I can touch this desk to then do this? How does the fact that I can do this with this desk affect the floor?
Absolutely.
Think about it.
Yes. Look at 163 as well. It cuts from the rape scene to these men playing poker around a table, and he says, you know what luck is? Luck is believing you're lucky. And I think that fits with what you guys are saying about Stanley. He's almost delusional about his pragmatism, where he is like, I can make my own luck. I don't have to depend on whether or not I get a good hand of cards, because I will make the hand of cards good. I will lie and I will cheat and I will make the luck work out in my favor, right? And I think that's good. What you guys are talking about, like, he understands what the real world is to people, and he is able to then manipulate that real world to get what he wants, which is, I think, I think we'll leave it right there with Stanley. Okay, tell me really quickly, what epistemology did you think that Stella?
Well, we kind of came to the conclusion that Stella is kind of a walking contradiction.
Yeah.
So she's both heavily empirical and also heavily constructivist, because throughout the novel there are moments where she's empirical, like on page 121, where she basically refuses Stanley's narrative about how Blanche is like a horrible person and whatever, and says it's pure invention. There's not a word of truth in what you're saying. And she's judging very much on what she's seen, what she knows, what she can feel, and what she directly knows. But eventually she also slowly kind of collapses into this constructivist view, where she just kind of accepts other people's view of reality, because her will is so far gone, she can no longer maintain that empirical view of truth and stuff. And something like that would be when she's talking to what's her name? Her neighbor.
Eunice.
And Eunice. And she's like, I don't think I could stay with Stanley if what Blanche said was true. And Eunice says, then don't let it be true. And she's just like, okay.
Okay, that's what I gotta do. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that gets a tragedy of gender too. I think all of these, in the way that they kind of contradict each other, start to speak to how real gender is at all in any of these epistemologies. So we'll start there next time. Next time, you guys, on your paper schedules, and I don't know if you use those, but it says we're starting Lord of the Flies next time. And we're going to push that one day. And next time we're going to have a kind of class-long seminar where you guys are really leading the discussion. So, and that will get us caught up to the other section too, and it'll be great. Okay.